How do you analyze the strength of South Korea? At the same time, some threatening factors Korea facing in pursuing sustainable economic growth in this fiercely competitive international environment?
Well, South Korea, like many of the Asian economies, came out of the economic crisis much more quickly than the United States did, and much more decisively than the United States did. And I think maybe this is in part because South Korea learned so many hard lessons through the Asian economic crisis in 1997 and 1998, when you'll remember that. So I think that the strength that was built up from learning the lessons of from the Asian economic crisis ended up helping South Korea a great deal in the current crisis. And you've seen that all of the Asian economies, led by China, have come back into much stronger growth much more quickly than the U.S. has. And with much greater employment results as well. Unemployment is very low in South Korea these days. So compared to the rest of the world, certainly compared to the U.S. and the weakest countries in Europe, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Greece, the countries that have suffered the most, I would say South Korea is in very good shape. The alliance with the United States has strengthened considerably over the past 2 years, and I think that has helped South Korea a lot. President Lee is much more in tune with the philosophy in Washington with President Obama than either of his two predecessors were, and I think that's helped knit up the relationship. The big question is, can the North Korean regime avoid what's happened throughout the Arab world right now? And maybe they can, because they're so much more cut off than the rest of these states. But you have to think that what was bad news for Mubarak in Egypt and for President Ben Ali in Tunisia and for the King of Bahrain and now for Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, you have to think that sooner or later that news is going to seep into the north.
Let's talk about historical movements recently happened in the Middle East and Africa. What has happened so far is unprecedented. Tunisia, Egypt, and now Libya. Do you think what was the most important driving force which made impossible in the past possible now?
We're asking a very good question, which is, since we've all known that these societies were ready to blow, what caused this earthquake? And Leon Panetta, who's the director of the CIA, has a great phrase for this. He says, he's from California, and he says, we all know we're going to have a big earthquake. We just don't know when. And that's what's happened here. We knew the forces that were building up in the Arab world, and they were a very large young population, very low to negative economic growth, few job opportunities. And while the Arab world, the narrative in the past 10 years has been fundamental Islam versus America and the West, the really interesting paradigm in the Arab world has been a dissatisfied people against a group of autocrats who have not brought big economic growth. So then the question is, why is this happening in the Arab world and it's not happening in China? Because the Chinese leaders have recognized that you can keep people pretty happy with 8 or 10% growth. And they're willing to overlook a lot of authoritarianism in those conditions. You can't keep people happy with no economic growth. And so the moment came, and then of course there are all the social networking issues that enable so many of these young people to recognize that they have common cause across borders, whether it's Tunisia or Egypt or Libya or wherever. So the ability of authoritarian regimes to control the information flow about what was happening in neighboring countries just fell apart.